we are working now on the last unit that we have, at least for this semester. And this is talking about a topic called views. And views are an interesting construct. So I know that many of you have worked with databases before in some capacity, maybe even professionally. And when you're looking at stuff in a database, rarely is it that you're actually working in SQL Server, for example. You're not usually working on that kind of a level. Usually you'll have some sort of an application screen or an interface created for you that will present the information that you need to do your job, so or whatever task it is you're trying to accomplish. Often those interfaces are in the form of a form. So if you think of like an HTML page or a application that has form elements like text boxes and drop downs and buttons and fields to fill out and things of that nature. And sometimes the stuff that you see in that interface is somewhat predetermined by some database administrator. So for example, if I were to create a database, let's say we were looking at those videos, right? And the videos all probably have perhaps like a Library of Congress number, like books have ISBN numbers, which gives them a unique identifier in terms of all the movies out there. And the way that we look at that information is like, well, that's really cool that it's got this really fancy number that uniquely identifies it, but you know what? I really don't care because this is just a Toy Story movie or whatever, whatever movie it happens to be. And so that piece of information isn't necessarily relevant for the user. In fact, let's say that you were trying to do something on a website to look up something about that movie. Some fields of information would be really important for you. So, for example, maybe the year it was produced, or who the actors are, or the title, etc. But other aspects of it, maybe there's a database entry for who the key grips were. I really don't know, but you probably don't care. So you can actually generate what we call in database programming what we call a view, which is kind of like a predetermined, I like to think of it as an interface, is the way I think of it, or glimpse into the structure of a table. And what that really kind of does for us is it controls what the users actually see. So you don't want to present those extra columns to them. Or maybe what you can do is by generating a view which only extracts certain information from your database, you can also create indexes and other components that make it even more efficient to pull up the information than it might otherwise be. So it's a construct that's used, and I want you to make sure that you understand that it's not like you're creating a visual element here. That's not what we think of as a view in a database. What we look as a view as a database is what aspects of it we're looking at. And that's considered the view. And now, in the old days, pre-GUI, what information you're presented with is the view. Even though it's text and not in the GUI format. We've kind of evolved to think now that a view is GUI, but it's not necessarily it. It's just what information we're looking at. So that's it in a nutshell. To create a view, there's just some pretty simple code for it, and you just simply tell it what you're including. And so you say create the view, give it a name, and then select the columns that are appropriate from whatever table it is that you're working with. And then once you have that view created, then you can use it to do things, like to run queries, for example. So you can take a really complicated table, create a view for it that's more simplistic, and then do all your database stuff on top of that view. And so it becomes really kind of a handy little tool because it really builds a separate construct logically within the database. There's also the ability to alter a view, and here's some of the code for that. All right, so we're going to be working on this assignment. I already have the document up on my screen somewhere. and we have some tasks that we need to perform before we do any of the work. So the first thing that we have to do is we actually have to create the database that we need to do the work. It says first run the education SQL script to create the database education, all the tables and data to complete this assignment. So let's go into SQL Server. Make sure that you download this file here, the education SQL file. And I'm just going to go into SQL Server Management Studio here and just open that file. So I'm going to go looking for it. And that should be in my downloads right up here at the top. And that's my procedure for doing this. And I know that I think I demonstrated earlier in the semester, like if you take a file like this, it's got a whole bunch of commands, and sometimes if you copy and paste it in, depending on where you're copy and pasting from, it can come in a little bit messy. Depends on the tools that you're using. So I usually prefer this direct approach. You'll notice that it has some code in here that checks to see if it's, if it doesn't exist, go ahead and make it. Otherwise, don't recreate it. So just in case you've tried this before. And then it has all the commands for creating the tables, inserting values, and does a little bit of an output just to show us that it's there. And then if you're interested in dropping all the tables and whatever, you can do that too, but those are commented out. Let's go ahead and execute this script. And it looks like it worked. All right, let's collapse down our database. Let's hit a refresh here, maybe a couple of times. You guys know that one well enough by now. And let's just take a really quick look at our tables. At least I thought we had tables. All right, they're not seemingly there yet, so I'm just thinking that it's just not fully refreshed yet. It's not successful, right? So I have to assume. Now, whenever I look at this, the refresh issue that we have with this, I always think to myself, somebody should go in here and fix that. And there must be some functional reason why it takes a little while for it to happen. Okay, I'm just going to take it on faith that the stuff is there. The thing that I guess perplexed me a little bit is it should have, right, done all these. So, in fact, let's just do this really quick. Let's just create a new query, and let's just say use education. And let's just run that and see if we can pull it up. Okay, so it's not finding it. And I know that sometimes we have to do this to find it. It's still not finding it. So I have some concerns that some of my stuff didn't actually work. I'm not seeing all those tables. Definitely created. Let's do it again.
Mine did the same as yours, by the way.
All right. It says it worked. I'm not really feeling very confident about that right now. Not a great feeling, but let's see if this time, if it did create the table. It did. So I have to say that I'm a little perplexed by this. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to actually alter this query, and I'm going to start here. So let's see if we can start from that point and make it work. All right, now it seems like it worked. Isn't that kind of weird? All right, and I think now I see what the issue was. But if I were to Oh, no, it's there. I thought that maybe this was missing, the semicolon, but it wasn't. Okay, so for whatever reason, just removing that top part and running it again made it work. And now I think if I hit the refresh, okay, all of our tables are there, and then all the data is there, and we can see it. And I don't know if you guys knew that you could do that. You could run multiple select statements that have multiple output windows all at the same time. That's absolutely fine. A little weird to do, but doable. All right, so now that we have that out of the way, now we can actually jump into doing the actual work that goes with it. Now, I think the nice thing that the document does include here, and is the fact that it shows you how all the tables tie together. Now, some of this is based on our academic environments, and so you guys are kind of familiar with how these things work. So I always think that student and course databases are really kind of great examples for database courses, because here we are in the midst of contending with all these things, so it's tangible for us. All right, but let's go now and start taking a look at how we can start to use views to help narrow down some of the information that we're presenting. So the first thing that they want us to do, it says create a view named view student grade to show these particular fields from the student and roster tables, and it gives us a hint that we have to use join. So let's first take a look at that information, and I think it's important that to wrap your head a little bit around what you're doing before you do it and why you're doing it. Okay, so first let's take a look at these two tables are the ones that we're kind of pulling together. So the student's got student ID, last, first, address, all that stuff, date of birth. The next one, the roster table, has a roster ID, and then the student ID, course ID, section, and grade. Now, if you think about how this works, and this is exactly the kind of thing that I see, is if I log into some of our systems here at Gateway, and I pull up a course, and based whatever that course ID is, it'll pull in a list of all the students that are signed up for it. That's our roster. So that roster will have its own unique ID, that own unique listing, and that will tie to the students through the ID. It'll tell us which course it is through the course ID. And then what makes it unique is there's a section number that makes it unique, and ultimately whoever takes that will get a grade. Now, doesn't necessarily mean that if we're looking at a student grade that we need to know their date of birth, right? So it doesn't need to be part of the view, so I wouldn't generate an output that included that. Now, because this is pulling information from two tables, and we're kind of narrowing it down, you could argue I could just run a regular query and it'll pull back that information. And you know what? You're right. Totally. You could run that query and it would pull the information back just as well as a view could. However, the view can be saved, and from there on forward, whenever you want to run a grade report, you just pull up the view. You don't have to rebuild the query. Yes, you can save your queries and pull them back. Yes, you can do that too. But the view becomes its own entity then. And as the result of becoming its own entity, you can then query what you would think of as a query. So I don't know if that makes any sense, and maybe a little bit of a long-winded explanation there, but the point is that you can kind of pull that all together that way and kind of use it and leverage it. So let's get that first command in there. It's going to take a little bit to make it happen. So I've got my SQL file here on the other screen. I'm going to paste it in. And this is one of those where, like, if you're going to watch this, in the video aftermath, here are the answers, folks, by the way. This is my cheat sheet. Here's the code that will make that happen. Let's move that over here. So over to SQL Server. Let's create a new query window while we're at it. And let's just take a quick look at this. So we're creating a view, we're giving it a name, and there is a little bit of a convention as you guys have seen with naming things, and not everybody follows these, but it is a thing that, at least in education, we try to push people to be consistent. And the same way we kind of like use prefixes on named objects and like GUI interfaces, for example, we do the same thing in databases. So VW, no, it's not Volkswagen. It stands for a view. So we're creating one called student grade, where we go through and we start selecting. Now you see the little pseudonyms that we're using. So we're using S for student and R for roster. You could spell them out all the way. If that's better for you, go for it. And then we're pulling certain columns from the certain tables, and then we're joining it based upon student ID in both, and that makes sense because that's the common field. All right, let's go ahead and execute this. All right, and is this what you expected to see, I guess, is the first thing that you would think. Well, yeah, it is, because really what you're doing is you're creating this, and this is just saying, yep, you created it. All right. So now we have that structure kind of built as a view, and whenever we want to utilize it, we will be able to do that. So let's put this in, and I think that if you actually remove, this is probably the better way to do it. Now it's going to throw an error because we already did it, but it would have shown the results of that. But now we can actually run this, and it really should be the way we did it. It should have been the other way around. Okay, it still gives us this, and I was hoping to see the output of the table, but either way, we have the structure in place, and really what this is trying to show us is the result of doing that. What I guess perplexes me about it is my thought was it should also show the output, but it's just not doing it. And I don't know if you guys are getting a different result. Are you guys getting a different result? Anybody doing it at home?
I'm getting an error message of invalid object named student.
Jill, what I'm thinking there is because I'm looking at these tables here.
Mm-hmm.
Did your table actually create?
Yep.
All right, and if it did actually create, try doing this. Like put U's in front of it, and then maybe run it.
Then I got the need to create view as the first command line in a series of queries.
Okay. I think we kind of have to look at that separately. I think the
Okay.
yeah, I think we have to look at that a little bit separately. Now, in terms of like what we're creating here, we got a couple of different issues, because now my hope is that we would have been able to see that Yeah, see, and what should have happened here is when I ran this, it should have showed the data. So let me go ahead. Yeah, it's giving me back exactly what I typed in, but it's not giving me the results of the query.
Yeah, mine's like that too.
Everybody's getting that same result? I think that's fascinating because maybe they changed the output window on it or something, because normally you would see that view. I mean, you see it
If you
here.
do a select star from that view, then it shows you all the data, but
Right.
that's
Yeah. Absolutely, Brenda. But see, this should also, unless the command's been changed somehow, and I'm not going to put it past anybody. But yes, we can do this, and it should pull that back. So, all right. What if that's the way we have to do it? I guess that's the way we have to do it. But the fact that that's underlining red right now too doesn't make me entirely comfortable either. So that tells me that really we probably need to do that, and then probably do that. But notice that's not even getting rid of the underline. And then the other thing that you can do is you can just actually call it database object. It is finding it because see the auto sense is turning on. So I guess I'm not necessarily trusting the IntelliSense so much. But as long as you can get that output. So, but like I said, I'm sorry?
What's weird is that I have twice as many records as you do, and so I'm wondering what I did wrong. Did I do something
Oh, you have
wrong?
twice as many? Really? Did you maybe insert the data twice?
Maybe. Oh, yeah. That's because the first time it didn't create all of my databases. Thank you. That makes sense.
That's probably it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of a little bit of a lesson with like database stuff is patience. I will tell you that I am finding SQL Server to be a little less stable than I've seen it in the past, and I don't know what functionally is happening in the background to make it less stable, or in terms of like what we're seeing on the screen, like we're typing in commands. The whole fact that sometimes they have to type them in twice to get them to work, I think, is a little weird. But knowing that, you always try again before you go changing stuff. Maybe I didn't press enter the right way, but I know I did, so that's a little bit of a frustrating thing. So as long as we can get that view and actually look at it, I guess that's what I'm concerned with. What I would recommend, I would probably and I'm just trying to think here, when we did this command, the SP help text thing, and I know I had it in here. Was it in this file or this file? Control Z my way back to it right there. Right? This, I would run this and I would screen capture that. So I would snip this into the document because that helps me see that you did it. So you could kind of do that, and then copy it into the document, and just so you see like my solved version. No, it's not unit 2, but this is how I have it in there. So I have both. Although in previous iterations, I don't know if there's like a change that happened. This command would work not only to show that, but also to show the output. But it's easy to get the output with a select statement. So if we know that that's how we have to do it, I guess it's not really that big of a deal at all. I mean, it could be much worse. All right, let's move on to number 2. So for number 2, it says modify the view above to include one additional field, course name, from the course table. So it's kind of nice to know what grade you're getting, what course you're getting the grade for. And let's go ahead and do that. So this one's going to be really similar to what we did, except this time we're going to use the alter command instead. So just going to, boy, that's not pretty. Let's copy it from here instead. A little better. All right, let me get this out of the way here so you can see all the code. Almost all the code. All right. Once again, it looks like it's having a hard time finding all the objects. So I'm just going to be safe. Put in the go command. And still didn't help anything. Anyhow. But we're just using the command here, and we're just adding in course name. And now notice that does take us to a third table, though, because that is being linked in through course ID. And so we have to include the join for that table and what field is used to join. So that's really kind of the big differences, is this addition, the additional join with the additional field. And notice that this one does include a select statement, and I don't know if I maybe missed that on the first one when I was copying my code over. I don't think I missed it. So let's go ahead and execute this. And it says, of course it completed with errors. Let's try that one more time. Alright, so this time it worked. And are you noticing that it is giving me the output as well? Now, I'm knowing now why it's giving me the output, of course. It's because I have a complete select statement here where the last one didn't, right? So, yeah, I'm looking at my code, and sure enough, on my other screen here, I didn't add the select statement at the bottom. So we could have added a select statement to do the output. So this will be all your code for this, folks. And I would put the use statement in there too, because apparently we really did need it. And then if you want to run that sp command and pull back the other screen, you can do that. And in fact, not too hard to do, I suppose. Let's do it in a separate window. What's it called? Student grade. And there's that piece. So I would screenshot that and paste it back over and put that into the document as well. Alright, so hopefully you're good there. Moving on to number 3. Number 3 says create a view named View Instructor Department to display the instructor ID, last, first, and department name from the instructor and department tables. And it says use schema binding in this view. And you know, they're giving you what the output should look like. And I'm going to go ahead and just create this. I'm going to throw my use statement at the top just to be on the safe side. Still not liking those object references. It is pulling in from the different tables, so we're going from department ID to department ID. So one in department and one on instructor. We could create a select. We don't have to be as particular as they are above. I suppose I can just copy the select statement from there. However, I'm going to just say VW instructor department. Gotta say from as well. And then we should get an output that looks like this. Now they already showed us the output, and hopefully that's correct. And then of course you can run that SP command again to pull back the structure. So this is the code, so I'm just going to grab all this, paste it in. And you can see not particularly too difficult. It's really more the exercise of doing it and getting practice with it. Views are, I think, kind of a neat little way to have kind of like a structured query that you can recall and use over and over again and adjust and tweak and then never really mess with your original structures. The thing that's even cooler about it is once you start realizing that you're really just creating another table object, so to speak, then a lot of the same things that apply to a regular table apply to these views, including, very importantly, creating indexes and stuff. So this one says create a unique clustered index for the view you created in step number 3. Name the index department instructor and make it on the view you created the field's department name and then paste your command here below. All right. So this is actually not a very complicated command to write. If you can decipher what is being asked for, it's actually pretty simplistic when you get a little practice with it. Let me just make a new query here for this one. And it says create unique clustered index, right? And we name it, and then we pick our structure that we're basing it on, and this time instead of a table we're just using a view, which is really a table, and then which fields we're using, and then we will execute. So let's go ahead and do that. And it says completed successfully. So the first thing let's do, let's get this pasted into the document. All right, and now we're assuming that we're indexed, but might not be a bad idea to refresh and just verify that that's actually the case. So we created another view, and see, here's the thing that's kind of fascinating about this is I'm not seeing this pop up. You know, I find this very frustrating that it doesn't appear as quickly as I would like it. All right, now it's there. We go. All right, and then inside there, then you can see the index, just to verify that it's been made. So if you want to go to that trouble just to make sure, I tend to be of the personality type where I like to make sure that it worked, which is why I find some of these like slow refreshes on these things kind of frustrating. All right, on number 5, it says create a view named VW course lookup that displays course ID, course name, course credit, and department name from department and course tables where the course ID starts with 107. Use the check option on this view. So here now we're throwing in another little tidbit. So we're putting in criteria, we're putting in search criteria basically with the where statement, looking for 107, and checking to make sure that it's a valid option. So in other words, you know, that it has to be part of 107. So what that tells you is when you do that where statement searching for 107, 107 isn't the entirety of the entry, it's just the beginning part of it. So I think of, like, you know, like a lot of our web courses start with 152. It's kind of that equivalent of saying, like, well, I want everything that starts with 152 and everything that follows. So it's a matter of how you structure that. Of course, then you have to use the wildcard to build that query. So that query is going to look like this. So we're going to create the view. And we're pulling all the fields as they asked us to do, and I think we're getting comfortable with that now. So from department and course, we're joining on department ID, where the course ID is like 107. So notice the percent sign for the wildcard, and then the check option to make sure that it's there, basically. So let's go ahead and execute, and it said it completed successfully. So we should end up with an additional view here once it decides to refresh, and I'd like to know what that refresh interval is. But let's just assume it worked. This is the query. And let's get that pasted in. Now we can run, of course, select statement. I'm just trying to find like the blankest of all my query windows here. So we can do select star, and what do we call this? VW course lookup. And let's execute. And then you see the same results. So this isn't bad to, you know, if you did this, you could screenshot it and just, you know, one thing, like if you're looking for efficient screenshots, you could always do something like that and just capture this and get both. I'm sure you guys know that. All right, let's call that one done as well. Let's go back over to the document. Okay, so number 6 says, using the view that we just did, update the value for the record with the course ID of 107185 to be a 1 credit. So we're going to change the view, and this is where I think this is particularly powerful. So really the view is kind of, you know, a conglomerated collection of connections to different tables. And yes, we can still do updates, inserts, and deletes on top of those views. So I can change one aspect of one of the tables that I'm tied to with an update command through a view and still have it change the data. This is really, really cool. And when you start to kind of get a feel for that, you can see some significant power in this structure. So let's just do this to start with. The command for updating that information would look like this. So we're gonna look at that particular table. I don't know if we should add our use statement here. I'm guessing we probably should. Maybe that'll make the underlines go away. Maybe not. All right, let's go ahead and execute anyhow. Do the update, and it looks like it worked just fine. And then if we were to go and look and track down that information, we should have that. So let's take this command and paste it over. I'm just taking it on faith that it will work. And of course, you know, the answer to that is, of course, yes, it worked. And it asks why or why not. And you know, I mean, generally you just say yes, it worked. What else do you want to know? But it's asking why it worked. And the reason it worked is because it's an actual column, and there was actually a course named that. And I don't know, I guess I didn't look up what the credits were before, but let's just assume it was 2 or 3. It seemingly worked. We don't really know because we didn't look beforehand, but the fact that it worked is because the data was actually there. So that's what I would say. I would say yes, because it was valid information. Yes, because it existed, or something like that. Some people would say that it's not ambiguous. Might be a good way to look at it too. So don't mind my spelling there. All right, moving on to number 7. And just a few more to do, and then we're done. I know that we're already at noon, so if you guys need to bug out, this is when the meeting's supposed to end. But I'm going to keep going, and then after I'm done, I'm willing to stay on the line and work through any issues you might have for a little while. I see that Vaughn's joined us. Hello, Vaughn. So we're now working on number 7 in the Unit 9 assignment. Okay, the next thing that it says here, create an encrypted view named VW Instructor Class with all this information. We want the class's begin, end date, location, all that have an end date in 2011. And then we want to check our structure as well. All right, so this is where it gets a little bit weird, because now we're saying that we're encrypting it, right? And we haven't really lectured on this at all. But there might be some reasons why some of the data that you generate might not necessarily be great for other people to view in transit. And so, or even when stored. So it is the capability of these high-end database products to actually run encryption directly within the structure of the database, which is kind of a powerful feature when you start to think about it. It does add overhead, though. So I always tell people this, that sometimes it's smarter to actually have controlled points of entry to get to the data, where you got to get through login screens and whatever, which you would probably have to do anyhow just to get to the data. However, if there's parts of a database that people have access to that you don't want others to have access to, then this might apply. But it's really more practice in doing it than anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and get the command here for this to make it happen. I'm sure you guys were busily coding it while I was talking. And it looks kind of like this. Not minding the pretty indents and stuff. Where normally I would do something like that.
Question about that. Is this with encryption? Yeah, this is encryption.
Yes. And what is the question, Vaughn?
I promise it'll be quick. So if you once you do this, then it's encrypted. When I did a select on it, I was able to select on it. Was it because of my login, or was I able to select a view?
Yeah, that's a very excellent question. Yes, it is dependent on login, because it is being created with basically the super administrator account. You will of course have access to it.
Okay,
and it doesn't necessarily mean that you can't pull the data back. It just means that the way that it's being stored is hashing the data. So if I was to take a look at the raw data inside the database, I wouldn't see what was typed. I would see what was generated by the encryption. And I'll tell you what, here's a really good example, and let me see if I can, maybe this is a little bit of a sideline here that, if I go too far down the rabbit hole, you guys have to pull me back, okay? I'm thinking of a number of my, I'm just trying to think of the most efficient way to do this. I'm going to go into a database here, and this is a MySQL database, mind you. And I'll give you an example of how the encryption works. Like, for example, in some of our classes, we end up building WordPress sites. WordPress sites store all their information in a database, the pages, the logins, the transactions, comments. You can see some of the tables here that come with a WordPress site. The user table shows all the users and their logins. And you know what? It even shows their password. Yeah, it's right here in plain text. So I don't know if you can make out that password. That's not actually what we type, though. That's the hashed version of the password. So, and let me explain what happens here. Is I'll type a password into the system, and there's a engine on the back end, which is the same thing we just did with the view here. As I type it in and hit enter, it runs through an algorithm that takes all the characters in whatever my password was and hashes it. So it has like this certain technique it uses to convert it to characters that would never show you what the password is, and then you would need a special key to decrypt it. And it doesn't mean that the data won't be able to be pulled back the way it is, because obviously if I type, let's say my password is password, somehow the system knows how to take whatever I typed and convert it from that back to password, and it's transparent to the user. The user would never know that it's being encrypted and decrypted, but if you looked in the database physically at the table, this is what they would see. They wouldn't see the actual data. They would see the hashed version of the data. So Vaughn, I don't know if that really answers it.
No, that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for, because I thought it would ask for a key, but it didn't ask for it when I did the spec, and so it's like, but I thought I maybe I did something wrong, so I started this person it, and I'm like, but that explains, yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Right. So it really, all it's saying is that whatever standard encryption key they're using inside SQL Server, it's going to use that encryption method. And there are ways to actually trigger different types of encryption methods. Some data, like I said, some database admins will say it just adds overhead because it takes time to encrypt and decrypt the information. However, if somebody, let's just say, hacked your system and got into the raw data files, they wouldn't see any useful data. They would just see these hashes. That's really more the point of it. Now, because we're using this engine to do it, and I'm logged in with certain privileges, I can view it, store it encrypted, and pull it back unencrypted without having to do anything special to it. But it's a really good question, though, and I'm hoping that my explanation helps to clarify it. And I know that sometimes it gets a little fuzzy, just based on an explanation. But I think that's kind of, I think the this example of looking at wherever I had it in the browser on PHP my admin, and the real funny story I have that goes with this, and it's of course is based on experience, having done a number of different projects, and I've used many different systems, but there were times where I would work with a client, and they would build a WordPress site for them or whatever, and then hand it over to them. And, here's your username, here's your password, good luck, we'll see you later. And then invariably they change their password, and they're like, oh my god, I forgot my password. How do I get it back? Now these days WordPress has a password reset mechanism built in. A couple versions ago, guess what? It did not. So if you lost your password and you were the admin, well, guess you were done, sort of, at least conceptually. So what you could do is you could come in here and you can actually edit this, delete what's here. Now I couldn't just type my password in, right, like in plain text, because it's not hashed. But I could find the algorithm for hashing, and there's nowadays there's websites where I could just take my password, type it in, hash it using whatever mechanism I want, put it in here, and then it would work. So there's as long as you could get into your file system and your database, you could fix it. If you couldn't get into that, then you were really out of luck. And ask me how I figured that out, because I screwed it up a number of times myself, and then I had plenty of clients that did it too. And then you get to learn how that works, and that was really for me a mind-opening kind of thing, because it is hard to understand that, what that's actually doing. But I think that's a really good example. Now, can you guys refresh my memory? Did I do this? I don't think so. All right, so it says it completed successfully. Of course, it didn't quite refresh yet, although we can do a select, right? Somewhere here we have an easy select statement. Well, I guess not. So we can just type it right here, select star from. And notice how it comes back just fine. So the view that we're pulling back. Now, if I could physically, and this is a hard thing to really explain, if I could just physically get to the data of that, the way that it's actually written to the hard drive, I would not see this information like this. I would see what we were seeing on the other screen. Some like gobbledygook characters that make no sense. And the database does all the conversion. There are people that believe really heavily in encrypting everything, and there's plenty that really think that it's not a good idea to put it in a database because of the overhead. I'm going to say we have the processing power these days to do it, but then if you lose the hash key for it, then you're really screwed. You're really kind of up the river without a paddle. So really, really cautious using that one. It is fairly transparent, though. I mean, you see how easy that really was. I mean, you can't really tell what's happening. It just works, especially if you're logged in as super administrator. All right, so that's the code for number 7. Let's go to number 8. I think for number 8, I need more coffee. All right. This one says create a view called person sales in the AdventureWorks database. Now, I'm assuming that you guys still have that installed, and we're going to just try to follow the example here, and hopefully it works for everybody. I know that we install that database. We haven't really done that much with it in the past. I feel compelled to explain it to you. In the past, we used to do all of our database exercises based on AdventureWorks because it saved us, honestly, the hassle of doing a lot of the work. But I think that our new approach, where we sometimes build new databases each week and alter them a little bit, I think that's better practice for building and adjusting databases. So that's why we've kind of moved to that approach. And really, Christian drives a lot of that, and he's kind of like the spearhead on it, and I really like it. So, all right. The hint that we're given is use joins, group by, aggregators, and then think about which foreign key maps to which primary key in the appropriate table. So now this is going to take a little bit of time here to kind of look at these connections. All right, so let's take a look at these. All right. These particular items for the salespeople. So I want to go looking in the database first, and this is just how my head thinks, and maybe yours maybe doesn't think that way, but I hope it does. And I'm looking at all the different tables, and there's a lot of tables here, but we really need only one, obviously, and that would be salesperson, because we're told salesperson. Let's see what's in that table and what columns we have available. So, got a business entity ID, territory ID, sales quota, bonus, commission, yada 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 yada, and that looks wonderful, right? That's great information. Is there anything here that is pertinent to what we're looking for? Anything? No, right? I mean, this is how my head works. Well, I'm looking for salesperson, but I'm not finding first name and last name or customer ID here. So, what am I missing? Well, this is under the sales area here. So you notice they have like this whole schema that they've built, where they kind of have like higher structures and then tables within those higher structures. So maybe what we're really looking for is kind of something else. Like, are we maybe looking for an employee? Does that seem reasonable? I might be leading you astray, by the way. Has anybody worked on this at all? Anybody done this one?
Yeah, I finished. Yes, I didn't want
All right. And, as I'm kind of like hunting and pecking trying to find this, where would I search? Should I just go to person? Is this where I would find it?
I think I had business entity, then person.
Well, I'm looking at it as, so, I mean, I without like just pasting the whole answer on the screen, what I'm trying to do is kind of help you massage how you would figure this out if you're working on it on your own. Because to me that it's important that you see that connection. So I think there's several different tables that we have to work with here. All right. And it gets a little complicated. So I'm looking at, first of all, person, and it says person type, name, style, title. Okay, so our salesperson could be in here, right? Isn't that like a reasonable thing? So let me just do this. Let me type use AdventureWorks 2016. And then I'm just going to do a select. And the reason I'm doing this is more for demonstration than anything else. You can figure it out without doing these select statements. But the way that I always think, I want to see what's in there and what might work. So you might do something like this to try to help figure it out. Okay, what am
I did my main table as salesperson, and then I joined on person. But I don't want to throw you off track.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out why this isn't working. Well, it seems to be finding it, so let's just do it like this.
Before that.
There you go. All right. And see, there's a little designator here in person type for employee. I'm not sure what SC stands for. Maybe sales consultant or sales customer, etc. All right, so what I'm going to do just to save time on this, and I know that you guys will probably just end up copy pasting it, and I get it, is I'm just going to show you the code because to sit here and explain all the different connections in the tables is going to take a little while. And somebody refresh me as to what number this was. This was number 8. All right. So if you do your due diligence here and take your time, and this is probably one of the more challenging ones here to make the connections, and I realize that. And having worked through this a few times in the past, what I've always discovered is it would take me about, once I got into the flow of it, about 15 minutes, somewhere around there, 15 to 20 minutes, to figure out all the little connections and how to pull it in. And then ultimately, we end up with this command here, or SQL statement. All right, so we're using AdventureWorks, and then we're creating our view, and then let's look at all the aliases here first. So we have person, sales customer, salesperson, so that's the SS part. And then we're joining on territory ID. We're also joining on business entity ID, and then we're also doing some grouping, and then we come up with what we're asking. So this is really kind of a culmination of a lot of different skills coming together. I think that one of the weaknesses that we have, because we've moved away from using AdventureWorks all the time, is we don't really, at this point in the semester, have a familiarity of what's in that database because we really haven't used it much. So it's the hardest part of this is just tracking down all the stuff you need to do to make it happen. Not that you can't figure it out. So if there's any spot in this assignment that's probably most challenging, this might be it. But now we do have that view created. Now, of course, if we want to look at that view, we can just do and run it, and we should get, okay, it's not finding it quite yet apparently.
It's the same. You just go to education,
Yeah,
not the SAS prison.
yeah, you are right. Thank you, Nancy. So you guys are getting sharper with this. Oops. This is where we love our auto type. There we go. Okay. Very good. Now it's pulling back all those pertinent entries. And you can see this is a pretty large database. There's actually a significant amount of data here. So I think it's pretty cool. The grouping is working, obviously, because all people with a certain name are all grouped together. So this would be the result of that. So make sure you paste that command in here. And that's this one here. So this would be the result.
So, question.
Yes.
I thought we had to agitate on the customer ID because there's so many of them. We didn't?
So what's the question exactly, Vaughn? That we were supposed to do what?
Agitate on the customer ID and put that into like one field so that it lists all the customer IDs in that one field. But then you only have 17 rows instead of the 300,000.
It didn't do that?
I just didn't have to. That's good. I don't want to get something wrong. I don't want to get it wrong. If we did. Never mind me. Just
No, I think what you're really referring to, Vaughn, is the fact for let's say for this person that we're really looking for this total amount as opposed to all the detailed columns. So we could set it up so that it wouldn't repeat.
yeah.
Right. But then what'll happen is we're not going to be seeing all the individual transactions that led to it. But I see what you're saying. Yeah, we could rewrite that.
So that's why I did an aggregate on that column on customer bill. So then for customer ID, it lists all of the. Actually, can I put my query in the window?
Yeah, if you want to put it in the chat window, that would be fine. Let me see if I can pull that screen up.
And I don't, like I said, I don't know it.
And you know, if you can't, if it doesn't paste in cleanly, you could always save it as a file and paste the file in.
Okay, I think.
So if you want to do that, that's fine.
And the reason I did that is because in the notes it says we use aggregate, so I'm like, okay, so if it's going to use aggregate, then I'm guessing that that we have to do that. I mean, but I probably didn't. It doesn't sound like we had to do that, and so that's.
No, you technically you didn't, but
I just
it
don't
would
want
be a
to,
logical next step. Yeah, absolutely.
I just don't want to get that. I don't want to get that points taken off if that's the case. I'm putting this in here. Oh, that's my outro. Okay. Well, that's okay. You can see what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Let's see it.
All right. So you guys can see Vaughn's approach to this, and I think this is. Okay. Well, Vaughn, this is the second one. That's
Sorry, I'm looking at the create one and the
okay.
create view.
All right.
And
So
that one I did the outro. Sorry.
that's okay. And so we're really looking at this right here. Right. So this is okay. And see what Vaughn's doing here to make it more distinct is he's using the distinct command on this line here to narrow it down. So if you did it this way, that's absolutely fine, Vaughn. For me, I would probably start where I was, which was doing this, and then maybe add stuff to narrow it down. But we weren't necessarily asked to do that, but I can see why you did that. Yeah, but what you have on the second one looks really close to being the correct answer for that too. Now, of course, you're actually saying inner join and left join. All right, let's move on. Let's move on to number 9 then, because we're kind of burning the clock here a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is just create a new query window for this. And this is the answer for number 9. So without getting into reading the description so much, it says modify the view you just created to be encrypted with schema binding, and this is kind of the byproduct of that. So you just have to just declare it schema binding and encryption. I mean, you actually said inner joins and left joins on yours, Vaughn, which is fine. That should work. And I think our code's fairly close. And this is what I have as a solution. Are there other ways to type this out and get to the same result? Absolutely. You know, aliases and order of things can be changed and still get the same result. And once again, you could go through the trouble of coming up with distinct characteristics if you wanted to, make the query results a little bit more efficient. Absolutely. But this is what I'm looking for roughly for this one. And I think of all the exercises that we've had so far this semester, these 2 might be some of the more challenging. Now, if you finish 8, doing 9 isn't that hard. It's just a matter of adding a couple of things and adjusting. But once you get number 8 figured out, I think you're good, and tend to be pretty good beyond that. So this would be the answer then for number 9. So let's paste that in. And then they want us to verify it was a success. How do you verify it? You run that SP help text thing, and it should come back. In fact, I can just go ahead and do that. That's not a big deal. Now, maybe or maybe not, you would hope to see the results of this, right? And normally what would happen is you would see what's in there, but because we are encrypting it, you can't just spit it back up on the screen. It has to run through a query to pull that data back. To verify that that's the case, and you can just run that, and then you can see that you can pull back the data. You just can't pull back the other structural components that, or if you were to look at the raw data in the table, that would also be encrypted. Number 10 is actually pretty darn easy, and they just ask us to get rid of the view, and you can just do the drop command on that. Of course, let's make sure it actually works, because it asks, right? And it says it worked, and then therefore you just say yes. I mean, that's one way to verify that it works. Can you guys think of a different way to verify that it actually worked? Well, you could look, and if it's gone, but I don't always trust that, because you see how the refresh sometimes doesn't really cooperate. All right, so that's we managed to get through all 3 of those assignments. That was quite a bit of stuff to do. That's way more than we would normally do during one class period. But I'm glad we had the chance to at least do it. Now, I think we have everybody here on the line except for Katie and Keegan. I know Katie is working, so she can't join us, and I'm not sure what's up with Keegan. I'm going to have to assume that he's probably in the same boat, because he's usually pretty good about joining these sessions. So I'm going to get these videos posted, and then I just want to put out there, as I mentioned as we were starting, that I'm going to stick around here as soon as I hit stop on the video, which probably should be now, and answer any more questions or work on anything you guys need help with. And then I'm going to be giving you basically till noon on Wednesday. And I know that originally I said noon tomorrow, but I'm going to give you till noon on Wednesday to try to get your stuff in. And that gives you, it still gives you time that, like, if you get stuck on something, you can email me and we can try to talk. Now, my schedule is really weird, during the apocalypse. And I don't know if it is for you guys, but my sleep schedule's like all upside down. I've been trying to force myself to get up early to kind of get back into the swing of things. But let me do this. Let me stop the video from running. I think that was a pretty successful little session. We got through all of it. So this video ends here.